present to you the Short Box, Season 5. Let's go, yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a grand time. Lighten your comic world up like a landmine. First class Marvel man fine with a tan line. iTunes, the Short Box, you know my favorite line.
Check.
Yes.
Okay. Us still remains a marginally okay movie.
That is one hell of a sound check. That is really a hell of a
marginally okay. It is
okay.
relatively neat.
Yo.
It's a C?
It is a it's a
Grade-wise?
It's a B plus.
C plus? Okay.
It's not bad. It's just I think Jordan kind of
Jump the shark?
he assumed his audience was stupid. And I think if he'd have left certain things like that, you automatically you're like, yeah, I get it.
He
And
made
then
sure you got it.
Yes.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yes.
Yeah.
I didn't listen to the Straight Chillin' episode yet. Were you on that one?
Plug?
No.
Okay. Word.
Oh. What?
He was on the one before that, Demon Knight. All right.
Yeah. Yeah, I almost saw it again last night because Sarah hadn't seen it.
Oh, word. Yeah. Word. All right. Shortbox Podcast Crew, Shortbox Nation. Welcome to episode 243. I'm your host, Bader Milligan. Today I've got my man, Cesar Cordero, with me.
Yo.
And
we are shy just one person today. And I want to take some time. Did you say boo?
It is a custom.
Yeah.
It is a custom in the show to talk shit about someone when they're not here.
I think today,
like most cowards do. that is our MO.
Oh man, I didn't want to be the coward podcast. Coward. Real quick, I do want to say some things. Our thoughts are with Ashley. She was a big part of her world earlier this week. If you've even listened to one episode of this show or know Ashley personally, you know how much her dogs mean to her. And
she's a big animal person in general. Time. She's got a big heart for dogs, especially her own dogs, which are like, they're family.
Yeah, she lost one of her closest ones. I think the dog Tanner was 15 years old.
Yeah,
which is a hell of a lifetime to live. So she'll be unable to join us this episode, and she really wanted to do this Bernie Wrightson.
Oh, I know.
I think between you and her, I mean, that's a big reason why we decided to go with Bernie Wrightson's Artist Spotlight episode. So our thoughts of Ashley, man. I think we're all in agreement that maybe we can definitely dedicate this not only to Bernie, but in memory of Tanner as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So shout out to Ashley. We got your back on this one.
You know what's funny about Ashley? Her and I are designing the poster for the live event where we're collaborating with Straight Chilling. Mm-hmm. And I asked, we were divvying up the duties, like who's doing what. Mm-hmm. And then she was like, you going to ink it? And I was like, I guess. And she's like, I don't like doing it. I'm not as good. I was like, all right, I'll ink it. It was almost like we did rock, paper, scissors for it. And then she goes, how are you going to do it on Bristol board? I was like, no, I'll just do it digitally. And she's like, Bernie wouldn't do that.
Oh, no. She shamed you.
Dude, she Bernie Wrightson shamed me, man. I was dying.
Very
I was at work.
Aggressive.
It was funny the way she did it, dude. She was like, it's not what Bernie would do, but I guess that's cool. And I was like,
you want to do.
Damn.
Bernie burned by Ashley.
Totally consider doing that.
It was funny, man.
She ink shamed you.
It was great. It was good.
Shame.
Hey, Ed, she did tell me to make sure to mention to you that you mentioned the Twilight Vampires story.
The Twilight Vampires. Oh, okay.
Okay, there you go. I was like, oh, man.
I was like,
inside joke fail. So I'll let you think on that. Let me get these shout-outs real quick because I want some of our fans, supporters, and et cetera, know that they are important, and we're thinking of them, man. I want to shout out Justin Hall, part owner of Spring Park Coffee, Brass Tacks Coffee, and co-host of the Drunken Pod podcast. Always a big supporter. I want to shout out, speaking about Straight Chillin', shout out to Robbie, Justin, and Andy of the Straight Chillin' Crew podcast. I've been listening to their show lately, trying to get ready for this Creepshow one. So I listened to the one that you were on, the Demon Knight episode, and I know they just put out the Us episode. So shout outs to them boys, man. I can't wait for to be on the mics with them. Shout outs to RC Gamut, as well as Austin Wade Ellis. They've been ever since the episode we had Austin on and we talked about TKO Studios for the first time. They've been doing a really good job of just tagging us in whatever they do. I think they both ordered TKO comics, which actually helped us land that interview with Zhu Shun, I believe that is his name, writer, film director, and the owner of TKO Studios. So we'll have an interview with him really soon in the next couple weeks, so stay tuned for that. And lastly, man, shout outs to Nick Wagner for that awesome Hellboy poster. We posted on Hellboy Day. He just did it out of love, man. So shout outs to
almost
Nick
didn't.
Wagner.
I don't know if I was almost. Should I post this? I think because he just sent it to our or sent it to you, and you sent it to our.
Yeah, he
group
was
text.
like, "Look, man, I just wanted to do it." I was like, "All right, bet." So
I
shout
made
out
sure
to
to
Nick
tag
Wagner.
all his plugs
Yeah,
when I
yeah.
posted it.
And actually, I do got one more shout out. Shout outs to Dustin Gardenbush of Video Game Rescue. They'll be donating a bunch of freebies and shirts for the Avengers Endgame movie event that we're doing April 25th. It's that Thursday. So shout outs to everyone. Yeah, man. So with the shout outs out of the way, for those of you tuning in for the first time, this is episode 243. This is the return to form, return to an artist spotlight episode. We've done a few in the past that, quite frankly, have been some of my favorite episodes we've done. Some of the artists that we've spotlighted include Jack Kirby. We've done one for Mike Mignola, Akira Toriyama. I feel like I'm missing one more.
We did a Stan Lee.
We did a
but
Jack
that was-
Kirby one too. Yeah, we did the Stan Lee. That one was a special
Yeah.
one. So Bernie Wrightson is the focus for this episode.
Say his name again and put some respect on it.
Bernie motherfucking Wrightson
That's right.
Right.
is the spotlight and focus for this episode. And if you type in his name, I mean, some of the accolades that you'll see in a high-level overview of this fantastic artist. He's a critically acclaimed and absolute fan favorite American horror and comic book artist. And he's really honestly wore a lot more hats than that. But he's most famously known for co-creating Swamp Thing with Lin Wynn and his work on numerous horror comics.
Who?
And what is it, Lin Wine? I always say it wrong.
You said Lin Wynn?
Yeah, I did. I'm a piece of shit.
Yes, everyone. Bernie Wrightson with famed Korean writer.
Oh my God. Lin Ween, right? Lin Ween.
Ween,
Sorry.
wine, something Teutonic. You'll be
Yeah,
fine.
you're right. Lin Ween co-created Swamp Thing with Lin Ween of DC Comics, as well as numerous horror comics and his adaptation of the Frankenstein novel, which we'll get into a little
Yeah,
more detail.
sorry, man. We're just
No,
giving,
no.
you know
I-
we're
look,
giving you shit.
It's all good.
I'm waiting for you to say Brinny Rippin. You
I was like,
fuck up people's names worse
Bernie
than
Wrightson.
dude. You fuck up people's names worse than John Travolta. Dude. Adele Nazim.
So as I was saying earlier, Ashley and Cesar both were pushing for a Bernie Wrightson Artist Spotlight episode really hard, and I wanted to ask you, like, why the excitement over Bernie Wrightson and having him this episode so soon?
He is my favorite artist, and from the earliest memory I have of art really having a punching me in the balls.
aggressive.
It's two. It's Stephen Gammell's artwork in Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, which
yes.
I'll bring up later for if we do a champion, and Bernie Wrightson. And I remember when I was a little kid, my buddy's, his mom, she was a huge Stephen King fan. She had like a whole room devoted in their house to like this hardback Stephen King library, and she had the Creepshow adaptation.
Okay.
So he would bring it out. He's like, check this out. And just the artwork, I was too young for it, man. It fucked me up. Like,
Yeah.
I was like, ooh, this is scary. I don't like this.
Crazier than the movie.
Yes.
Oh my God, yo!
Like, I was like, this is really like
Yeah.
dripping. Everything's gory. And it's just like, there's like heads being
Oozing,
snapped around. And I was like, oh man, God damn it. Like, this is going to give me nightmares. As well it did. And then like, I completely forgot about it. And then something happened to where I think I had seen heavy metal, and for some reason it resonated with me. I didn't know why.
Oh,
like,
he
you know,
did,
because he created the Captain Stern character.
Stern, yeah.
And I just was like, well, this is like my favorite section. Not only because it has that badass Cheap Trick song, because it sounds so goofy compared to what's going on in the cartoon.
Yeah.
But it was just like, why do I like this so much? And even then, like his style, I was a fan of. I just didn't know it. And then, you know, he's done so many other things, the Swamp Thing being among them. And I guess my reintroduction was in college when I picked up the Punisher POV. And I was like, this guy is a Scott Snydering before Scott Snyder, you know, like trying to bring monsters into like Punisher's like a gangster fighting bad guy.
Speaking of that, did you ever read the Spider-Man Hooky?
It's in there. I got
Oh.
it. Oh yeah,
Which might
Yeah,
be
first edition.
Yeah, might be among my first, I think, exposure to Bernie Wrightson.
Yeah, so I've been a fan. I have two pieces of artwork that he has signed for me. One of them actually, you procured for me.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, my first exposure, it really kind of comes down to you can't be friends with C as long as I've been friends with him and not hear about Bernie Wrightson. And I mean, he was talking about Bernie Wrightson before I was even diving into his work. But I think the first time exposure period, I think you had shown me the Frankenstein book. And I think we were talking
That
about
shit costs money, man.
yeah, maybe hold it I wasn't allowed to hold it.
I was showing strangers on the street. Yo, don't touch it. Just look.
I had to look at it behind bulletproof glass. But I remember I was at Tampa Bay Con a couple years ago. It's probably like 2014 timeframe. And Bernie Wrightson was there. He didn't have a long line. And I hit up C like, hey, man, Bernie Wrightson's here. And he lost his shit. But the thing is, I was like, yo, there's no one in his line
slap
right now.
came through the phone.
So I actually went up to Bernie Wrightson and I got a print from him and
Mr.
he
Wrightson
signed
to
it.
you.
Yeah, it was really
Not make
dope.
eye contact.
And I remember looking at it, I think it was a Swamp Thing print I got you or whatnot. And I had told him, hey man, my friend is on the other line right here, and he's really excited. He wishes he was here.
He has a boner
big
right
fan.
now.
Yeah, it's
really
poking
weird.
through the phone. The guy was like, "Yo, give me that fucking phone." But he was like really nice, really cordial, and the amount of prints of like really scary shit on his table, and then you met him, and he's like, "Oh, hey, really jolly, like
unassuming."
You wouldn't assume he drew some of the horrific stuff he's
the
had.
hell? So I think that might have been, I don't know, my first exposure, like chance to also meet him, but I wasn't there,
Yeah.
After I did a shit ton of research this past weekend, and I'm like, fuck, I really wish I had a chance to meet him now, knowing what I know now. Ed, what about you? What was your first exposure?
My first exposure is probably I guess like everybody's, and I didn't. It's kind of like you see. I didn't know it. I was just like, man, this is really awesome and different. Is the Swamp Thing run?
Yeah, dude.
Swamp Thing, Creepshow,
Classic.
The Cycle of the Werewolves.
Hell yeah.
Book, the illustrations he's done, and he's one of those guys. He passed away relatively young, 68, but I honestly, he's been working so long. You think he would have been, in his, because he started at 20.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Because when he passed away, it's like 68. That seems young compared to like his peers and everyone else. So it's just the breadth of work, and not even being consistently kind of like a Neil Adams, where they have a big impact, but they didn't have big long runs in comics,
right?
Like a lot, because he found greener pastures doing work for movies and things, and doing his own his collaborations with Stephen King and working in the I think Steve Niles was the one who kind of dragged him back into comics.
Yeah, seriously.
Later in life.
Fellow Marylander.
Yep, and like I said, he's one of those guys. I just in my more modern, I guess, collecting youth, I just didn't realize he was around. Still around. Because his work has been around since the 60s, late 60s. So the creepy magazines too. Stuff like that.
Yep.
Just his stuff. I just finding out he did Ghost Designs and Ghostbusters
and another Ashley favorite, Ghost
Galaxy
Rider.
Quest. Oh, Ghost Rider.
Oh, really?
And,
I'll show you that shit.
Okay, bet.
And Galaxy Quest, he did designs on that as well.
Yeah.
Which, not great movies, but there's some cool looking stuff in there. Ghostbusters is great. But
And
Galaxy Quest.
And I'm actually going to chime in because you listed a few of these titles. And before we kind of go into his career kind of highlights and milestones, I was on his IMDb, and there's like 4 movies, I think, listed on his IMDb that they're giving him credit for. 2002's Reign of Fire for special effects. Galaxy Quest, special effects. Land of the Dead. They had him listed for makeup department, so I imagine maybe... Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So you're showing us Bernie Wrightson Ghost Rider sketch.
Oh, okay.
Damn, that's pretty badass.
That's way
Looked
cooler.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then they also had him down for The Mist as
Yes,
art
The
department
Mist.
Oh,
credit.
dude,
The Mist,
yes.
yeah.
And he had hella writing credits for Swamp Thing TV show, Justice League action shorts, the Batman and Harley Quinn. I think the animated movie that
Those
came out.
credits, I'm not sure, because I
Yeah,
don't know if they're like credited because he's a creator.
think so.
Or if he's a
Because
consultant.
IMDb
I would
listed kind of
assume
weird.
it's probably that's the case.
But those 4
And
movies
it's a
are
visual format, so he gets the visual credit.
Right,
Right.
For
I mean, he
the
did
character.
jizz out Bruce Timm for sure. Like, like that's not a diss. That's
No.
a compliment.
They had him listed for a Rondo Hatton Classic Horror Awards. He was a 2007 winner for the Monster Kid Hall of Fame Award. So that was just some interesting IMDb stuff there. I want to kind of get into his career highlights, man, because there's probably some listeners out there that's probably in the same camp, maybe as more so on me, where they've probably seen his artwork, just don't know the name attached, or like you said,
Sure.
Ed, like you just unaware of how much things he's done, like how long he's been in the industry. So I kind of want to go into just a quick overview of like career highlights in his life, and you guys can all kind of chime in if any interesting facts. But just kind of get out the way. Born October 27th, 1948, Baltimore, Maryland.
Yeah, yep.
Oh,
He did pass away 2 years ago, March 18, 2017, to a battle with cancer. And I was reading like about the day he passed away, and I remember I think we might have posted something. I know for sure.
For sure.
We were talking about it, but the day he passed away, Del Toro had pledged like a 24-hour,
Dude,
thing
Guillermo
of
del
silence.
Toro's that guy, man.
Yeah. Del Toro took a 24-pledge-hour of silence in honor of Wrightson.
that's tough for that guy too.
Yeah. Walt Simonson.
Dude likes to talk.
Walt Simonson had like some amazing nice things to say to him, like basically like bowing down, like, yo, this was the man and stuff. So when he passed away, his death was definitely felt amongst both comic book artists and horror enthusiasts too.
So we all know Rob Jones.
Yes.
Okay, so, and I think all of us know Rob Jones at one point was the just an assistant to Dick Giordano.
Yeah.
Okay, so I had the opportunity. This is like having freaking lunch with God. I had the opportunity to go to lunch with Dick Giordano and Rob one time.
Cool.
And he's telling all these stories working at DC. Like he's talking about. He goes, "Yeah, Alan Moore. He was a good kid." Kid. And he goes, "Oh, Bernie Wrightson, what a wonderful young man." And I'm sitting here like, Jesus, you're like talking with
It's
the
like
other
he's
gods in Olympus,
patting him on the head,
right?
Like, here's a lollipop. Here's a dime. Nickel.
I was just like, I want to lick the liver spot on your fucking wrist right now, just because it might have touched Bernie Wrightson. It might have touched.
Actually, real quick before we get into this career highlights, Ed, did you want to share that story that Ashley had mentioned?
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
so,
I'm interested.
I think the first time I've known Josh for a little while, but this was the first time I think Ashley and I really hung out, and that was a drive up to Heroes Con in 2010.
Nice.
We've said maybe 3 words to each other before this, and that's when she was working on a comic with Rachel at the time. So we're just like, let's go up there, and I was like, this is going to be the longest drive ever. But we found out we had like a lot of stuff in common, music stuff, and just like talking a lot of shit about people, which is fun. But Bernie Wrightson and Steve Niles, that's one of the main reasons I went, is because, Bernie Wrightson's going to be there. I got to go. He's like, he's alive. I didn't, which is a joke he would bring up. But so we went there. Got to talk to him a little bit, and Steve Niles, they had like nobody in their line, which was crazy. But I got to talk with them for a few minutes, which was cool. But then we went to a panel, and it's like at the table, he was kind of, he was nice, but he was just kind of like, okay, I'm, next person, you know what I'm saying? And, but at the panel, he was really, really engaging, really funny. He's saying, it's like, people are asking, so what brought you back into the comic industry? And, so told the story about him and Steve Niles living like down the street from each other. And he's like, I've been working in, doing storyboards and stuff, and that's easy money for me. This is like, that money was so good. Plus, I think people just thought I died. But the people just didn't think of me still being active or around. But I've been doing behind the scenes stuff at movies, which you don't really get a spotlight for. But yeah, with the vampire story, this was like, I don't know if it was like the tail end, but it was like during the Twilight's kind of popularity.
Sure. So
there was someone, I don't know if someone asked him, I don't know what even brought it about, but someone asked him about today's, like kind of horror and like, Twilight, things like that.
Yeah.
And he's just like vampires shouldn't fucking sparkle. He was just really down on them. But they had a really, really good, a very good panel. It was probably the best panel I went to that year. But that was pretty much just that. Yeah, that little story is just very funny, very engaging, like very, very sharp. Because at that time too, I thought he was, just in my mind, just because how long he's been working, I just thought he was a lot older than he was, just because of his body of work.
I think it's because he's also associated so much with Frazetta.
Yeah.
That you think, he comes from the camp of Al Williamson, Ralph Bakshi, Frank
like
Frazetta, like all those
EC
dudes.
Comics era,
yeah, like
almost.
Pepe Gonzalez. Like, he worked with all those dudes so much that you're just thinking like, oh yeah, well he's their same age.
Yeah,
He's like,
exactly.
No,
No, he
he's like
wasn't.
30 years younger.
Yeah.
You know, like
There was a funny interview I was listening to, and he said he would go to the store. He couldn't bring the EC comics home, like Tales from the Crypt,
Sure.
Two-Fisted Tales, because they're, for the time, pretty,
Taboo.
intense stuff
Yeah.
and taboo. And that created a whole witch hunt trial for
Right,
comics,
right.
shut down comics. But he said that he couldn't bring those comics home, but the like 5 and Dime store or the grocery store he went to, they would let him basically read the comics for a couple of pennies. So they had all these kids around the stoop of the drugstore, basically giving them a couple pennies to read the comic.
Renting comics.
Renting comics.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty funny story. So you can see where those influences started really young.
yo man, I'll do anything. Tales from the Crypt, dog.
So
like
if
2
I'm-
pennies.
If I'm doing the math right, he starts working at the Baltimore Sun newspaper as
shit.
an illustrator at 18 1966. 1967, he meets Frank Frazetta at a New York Comic Con, and that was kind of what inspired him to produce his own stories. And I think Go ahead.
I'm just imagining like Bernie's got like a ponytail and like a like a freaking deep purple shirt on, and Frank Frazetta's just kind of sitting there looking at him, and he's
Death
like,
Adder helmet on.
yeah, like he's like, Frazetta's in there looking like a dad, like still jacked, and he's like, so you like drawing Conan and shit, and Frazetta's like, sometimes you like baseball, like he's complete jock, two opposite ends of the spectrum.
Didn't you say that Bernie had wrote like a letter to Frank?
He wrote
EC?
a letter to Frank via Creepy Comics and drew a little,
that's cool.
kind of like a little, hey, this is how I would draw like a cover or whatever. And even then, it's like
Yeah.
amazing.
Damn, that's cool. Okay. So he met Frank Frazetta at that New York Comic Con in 1967. A year later, he got a freelance assignment from Dick Giordano after showing him some copies of his art. So it's kind of like
Crazy, dude.
the momentum was just there, man, because that same year, 1968, so be about 2021
He's
maybe.
a good kid.
His first professional comic work, House of Mystery number 179.
Yeah,
He did
boy.
a 3-page story, Kane's True Case File story. The Man Who Murdered Himself is written by Marv Wolfman and, of course, drawn by Bernie Wrightson. That was his first professional work. So that's 2 years right after starting, as an illustrator for a newspaper.
You know what's funny is how much he's touched like the comic book industry, like the character
Big time.
of Kane. He didn't create Kane, but so many people remember how he was rendered,
Yep.
in the issues that he
Cain and
did
Abel,
work
yeah.
with. Yeah, and it's like fucking Neil Gaiman.
Yep.
They show up in his Sandman stuff because he's very like much kind of like throwing tributes back to those old House of Mysteries.
What was
you
it?
know?
I think the character Destiny that Neil Gaiman ends up
Yep.
using later was co-created by Bernie Wrightson. So 1970, he does some work for Marvel, including Chamber of Darkness and Tower of Shadows. Some have said that his Hallmark brushwork was said to have made his introduction between these two bodies of work. 1971 is when, a very pivotal milestone for him in his career. He creates Swamp Thing for DC Comics writer Len Wein. House of Secrets number 92. And off the bat, man, they've, I've only listed like 2 or 3 of these awards, but that initial run of Swamp Thing that year, 1971, 1972, they were winning Shazam's award for Best Penciler, Best Individual Story, Best, all these different awards just off that one series,
That first series of Swamp Thing is kind of like an anthology series because there's all kinds of weird stuff that happens
all
to
the, like-
Swamp Thing.
Yeah.
Like the Unmen show up and like the werewolf.
Yeah, not Alistair Arcane. What's his name? The main,
Oh, wow.
Abigail's
Alex
dad.
Arcane?
yeah. Oh, I can't believe I just brain farted.
Yeah.
But yeah, Abigail Arcane, his debuts, and the Unmen. But yeah, that stuff is just pure pulpy monster.
Oh, yeah.
goodness.
It's like, what do we want to do this month?
Yeah,
It's
and
like, let's do this one.
And as much as I like the Alan Moore run, it's like I could imagine if he was still on that Swamp Thing during Alan Moore's run too. That
Sure.
would have been pretty.
Oh, man,
pretty intense
trippy.
stuff. As
Real
much as I
trippy.
love the artist Bissett, it's like, man, this would have been really killer stuff.
So that was 1971 was when he created Swamp Thing. 1972, he publishes Bad Time Stories, the horror sci-fi anthology. And the interesting thing about this publication was that each story, he was drawing it in a different medium. So one story was an ink wash, you could go tonal, pencil, dual shade paper, brushwork. And that's one recurring theme I kept seeing amongst anything I was reading was Bernie just pushed himself. It was like,
Yeah.
I'm really good at this, but let me show what I can do with my brushwork or my painting. And it's like, damn, did this dude not like? Was there something that he wasn't good at when it came to art?
That's the Frazetta influence.
I was about to
basically
say the same thing,
Basically,
dude.
him telling us like, kind of carve your own path in this industry.
Yeah, like Frazetta's an athlete, so that's where he gets his motivation from, right? So he's like hardcore, like dude could have played baseball in the majors for real, which is also kind of a weird theme in comics. Like, so could have Todd McFarlane, which is another thing.
Yeah.
But like Bernie's not an athlete, but he applied that same sort of work ethic to like, all right, well, I'm going to try and train in the off season, as it were, and just get better doing all of this.
Word. So I got another one listed as like kind of a highlighted kind of career milestone, and this is 1974. He leaves DC Comics. He starts working at Warren Publishing. So he's doing black and white horror comic magazines, and he was producing original work and adaptations of stories like by H.P. Lovecraft and Edgar Allan Poe.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, damn. And I think it just, once again, and you'll see kind of a recurring theme for those listening, that he just kept pushing himself to the next challenge. It was, I've already mastered comic books. I've won awards. And this might not have been his exact mindset, but this is kind of how I interpreted it. It was like, all right, well, let me move on to, these classic bodies of literature, by H.P. Lovecraft and Edgar Allan Poe and Mark Shealy. It's like...
And then eventually, Frankenstein.
Yep. Yeah. So... 1975, he formed The Studio, which is more kind of an artistic kind of collective with fellow artist Jeff Jones.
The OG Image.
Michael
Kaluta, dude.
Kaluta, Barry Windsor Smith.
Dude, Barry Windsor... Wait, let's take some time with the heavy hitters, man. Mike Kaluta, his freaking pencils and inks on the Shadow for Marvel Comics, the Hitler's Astrologer series. Barry Windsor Smith, if you don't know who this dude is and you're a Marvel head, you need to get slapped in the face.
If you want my first thing with Barry Windsor Smith is... There's a 4-issue series of Machine Man.
Oh, nice.
Kind of like a goofy, kind of the goofy Kirby character that wasn't really a serious character. But, man, if you hunt that down, get that. That is incredible stuff.
Yep. Dude, at the same time...
Weapon X, of course.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Like, how do you not know who Barry Windsor Smith is? Yes. Him and Jeff Jones were still working with Warren Publishing, and they did some Vampirella stuff, too. That's pretty legit.
So the studio, as they were calling it, it was just a shared loft in Manhattan. Their goal was to pursue creative products outside of like the constraints of comic book commercialism. So they were doing posters, and that's where we got... Bernie Wrightson doing illustrations for like National Lampoon. They were doing prints, calendars. Yeah. And interesting fact,
Neil Adams did it first. Bernie did everything first.
Bernie Wrightson,
he'll tell you.
He'll tell you.
He did it first too.
Bernie Wrightson around this time had put out a monster coloring book. It was called The Monsters, Color the Creatures book. It was released in 1974. It includes like 16 really good black and white, of course, images that you got to color, going for a lot. I tried to look for it, but man... and even just scrolling through that book online, it's like, damn, and this was for a fucking coloring book. Are you serious? Like, what?
Yeah.
What? So, all right, so he formed a studio in 1975.
So much black here. Where do I color?
I'm going to fast forward to 1982. The Creepshow graphic novel with Bruce Jones is published in Spain. It will later be serialized by Heavy Metal. 1983, another key milestone right here, folks. Ding, ding, ding. 1983, he published a Frankenstein novel. It was originally published by Marvel Comics. And it was the adaptation of course,
that was like 50 illustrations with the text, the Frankenstein, and that was like a 7-year project.
I think after that project, he wasn't the same. Like he didn't get he didn't get like worse. It's just that project was like
Well, here's the thing too,
put everything into it.
That and I found out he was doing just kind of like a drawing presentation. And I think that time, too, he broke his wrist. So he was saying he had to kind of change his drawing style because the tendons didn't heal right.
Just like fucking Frazetta, man.
Yeah, so, I mean, that could be just that. Because if you look at those, I mean, that's by far my favorite work of his.
Oh, dude.
It's like lithographs.
Yes.
If you're looking up, most of just type in Bernie Wrightson to Google, it'll, of course, bring up Swamp Thing, but it's immediately... This Frankenstein
2-page spread with the lab.
Oh my god!
Him like choking, grabbing Dr. Frankenstein.
Yeah,
that is incredible.
Just him standing over Victor Frankenstein. Kind of like.
I think I found a quote by Scott McCloud, the comic analyst and historian. He called that image a riot of detail, and that was enough for me to pull it up and I try to find the HD version.
Yeah.
Holy shit,
It is
that
incredible.
An
That
insane
too, and then I know it
volume.
was like published by Marvel, but I've read that.
It was later re-released by IDW.
Yeah, but like the actual production of the book was outsourced to Fantagraphics because this was either at the really beginning or before like digital prepress. So Fantagraphics, who was doing more magazine type format stuff, they were the one that had all the equipment to make that edition. So that was even pre-digital.
I
setup.
wonder if this was kind of like one of the deciding factors for Marvel to start like producing the epic stuff. You know,
Yeah.
like there's like
That
we're
makes
not going to
sense.
miss this. We're not going to drop
Yeah.
the ball on this again.
I want to add something because Ed, you brought it up. I saw the same thing where he was saying this took 7 years, but the interesting thing is that this was all done on the side.
Yeah.
You're saying it took this long because he was working other gigs that were
he
paying.
was drawing stuff for
This was
Ghostbusters.
a
get
straight
a couple bucks. work on
labor
this.
of love.
Sure. Yeah.
Like, a side hustle.
He's always liked
Yeah. Yeah,
Frankenstein. Always.
Yeah, he was. I remember I've watched a few older interviews with him, and he was saying that, like everyone's Frankenstein, it's the Boris Karloff monster.
Sure.
And he said it took him several times reading Mary Shelley's Frankenstein because he was expecting like an adventure action type of formula like
Right.
the movies. It's but he said it took him a handful of times to read it to kind of understand what the story was actually about. So it's
And that's pretty dope that he wasn't letting any outside influence dictate the direction of the art. He was saying that he took it he read the, like you said, read
Yeah.
the book and
the book's not
interpreted
too
it from the book. It wasn't like
clear. It's not like she
Yeah.
described him to like, it was like very general.
Well,
so it's
see,
open to interpretation.
No, 8 feet tall, sallow skin, yellow eyes, long black
just about to
hair,
say,
no nose. Like that's my favorite book.
Yeah.
It is all in
and
there.
I wanted to see
because he said like it was. He said it. He actually quoted that in this interview, and he's like, but then he's like, it's kind of a little bit open, but I basically that's all I went on, and then created like the jet black hair.
It's perfect.
Yeah.
It's perfect.
And see, I think when we first had met, and you were, getting me hip to game with Bernie Wrightson and showing me that Frankenstein book that you do have. Like, I think that was one of the points that intrigued me about why you were so adamant and championed it so much. Was that like, dude, this is the one of the truest depictions of.
It's funny that
the book.
before I even knew he did the art for Frankenstein, that I was already such a huge fan of the book, and I was just kind of like, well, I guess the closest thing we'll get is De Niro. Like.
Oh God!
You know what I'm saying? Like, and it's funny that, that reaction is justified, but at the same time, it's closer to it than
that's true.
Karloff. No disrespect to Boris Karloff at all. It's just, it's not fucking Frankenstein.
Yeah.
No bolts are sticking out. The only thing that's vague in that book is how they reanimate the corpse.
Yeah.
There's like Shelley didn't really expand upon it. But as soon as I saw that book existed, I was like. Like everything I love in life, it's like Frankenstein and Bernie Wrightson. It's just like I couldn't believe it.
So that same year, not only did he publish
I'm not done talking, son.
the Frankenstein novel, but 1983 he also did the poster for Creepshow, and that led to a bunch of work with Stephen King, including illustrations for Cycle of the Werewolf.
I wonder if they did coke together.
Better
for sure.
You know,
believe it.
Like they just, I want that. Like I want to go like be a fly in the
And that was
wall.
the pregame. That was
like-
the
It's like
pregame.
maximum
Stephen
over.
King.
What should I have on the front of this truck? Green Goblin.
Fucking Green Goblin on it, man.
I'm gonna direct it myself, Bernie.
Do it. Get AC/DC. You love those guys and fucking Emilio Estevez.
So Cycle of the Werewolf, The Stand, and he did art for the hardcover editions of From a Buick 8 and the Dark Tower 5.
Which I think originally Cycle the Werewolf they wanted to do a calendar
Right.
of it because it makes sense with
It's
the
based on the lunar cycle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I got a couple more highlights. So 1984, he did the concept art for Ghostbusters. 1986, he did the, I think one of my first exposures to him, the Marvel original graphic novel Spider-Man Hookie.
Hook? What?
Hookie, right?
Just say hooky, man.
God damn. Someone's going to listen to this.
You are overthinking it. We have given Botter a complex. We have given him a complex.
Botter, it's the. No, man. That's how they get you. It's,
Yo, no,
the
it's
R is
to-
silent.
it's to head.
All right, my bad. 1986 saw the Marvel original graphic novel Spider-Man Hookie. He also did the Marvel original graphic novel number 29, The Hulk and the Thing, which is it's got a fantastic fucking cover. Around the same time, he was also doing Benefit Comics. He did 2. The second one being with Jim Starlin. He did one, Heroes Against Hunger, and it featured Superman and Batman. Speaking of which, 2 years later, 1988, he did 2 miniseries with Jim Starlin, The Weird and Batman the Cult, which I think I read last year based on your recommendation. See, that artwork is fantastic.
Yeah. Do you have the Punisher POV on your list?
No,
there?
which when you brought it over, I mean, at least his Wikipedia and his biography on his site didn't list that. So I'm sure there's a bunch of work that probably just won't have time to list. But I mean, tell me a little bit of that.
Dude, it is.
Jim Starlin joined at that too.
Yes, man. Like it is so. It's so zany. It's Punisher fighting like mutated like body part creature. Like it's like what like. What is happening?
Why did
here?
he draw that Rick Remender Frankencastle?
Dude,
how badass would that have been?
Damn, Marvel missed the fucking boat.
They would have been like, "Fuck you, take my money."
Yeah,
like yes,
because that concept on its own, and I think Tony Moore was the main artist, which he's great. But that concept, when I first heard it, I'm like, what?
Yeah.
But if it was Bernie Wrightson when I heard it, it's like,
dude,
okay,
forget
let's do
it.
this. So,
Yo, speaking about the Cult graphic novel or miniseries that they did together, I had found this interview on YouTube. I don't got it right here with me, but he was talking about how Batman had made an appearance in the Swamp Thing series of his early on, and he was so excited about drawing Batman. He was like, that's one of my favorite characters. But he was like, he was coming into my world, so that means I got to do what I wanted to do with him. And he was like, so I gave him the 30 foot cape. I gave him giant ears. It was like he was in my world, so I got to draw him like I did.
Yeah,
I gotta say it. I don't really like his Batman. I don't. He shows too much of the Batman. Like that's the thing. It's like it's so detailed and so there. For a person, usually every other artist, 1970s on. Batman's kind of either like hanging out by a shadow or in the straight shadows to begin with. Like, unless you're Neil Adams and everything's photorealistic. But I don't know. I love Bernie's artwork. I just never was a big fan of how he portrayed Batman.
Okay. 1997, he did some TV Guide magazines for the TV miniseries The Shining. 2005, I'm jumping around, of course. Production design for The Reavers and Serenity. That was kind of a milestone there.
Oh,
and the last one I've got, I think, Ed, you had brought it up a couple of times. 2012, we kind of saw him come back into the comic book world, and that's working with Steve Niles on Frankenstein Alive. That was an IDW.
Well, he'd worked with Steve Niles way before that.
Yeah.
With, City of Others, The Ghoul, Doc Macabre.
I'm saying as far as like his last kind of latest bodies of work.
Dead, She Said.
Yeah. So Frankenstein Alive, I think that won a National Cartoonist Society Award, and it was kind of deemed the sequel to the 1983 original series. I think. So you were saying it was a pretty good follow up.
It's not bad.
Okay,
it's not bad. Bernie's always best, and I don't know if you agree, Ed, when he does his own inks.
Oh yeah,
like. Other people
who the hell has done it?
Dude, other people try to ink Bernie Wrightson, and it does
like
not
with
look
The Ghoul,
good. Yeah.
I wish that was the case, and I wish someone else did the colors.
Right.
But the art is great.
Dude, I highly recommend it. It costs a bit, but that big black and white version of it, where it's almost like Bristol board size.
Oh, the artist edition?
Yes, and it has all three, the Dead, She Said, The Ghoul, and Doc Macabre in one book.
Where do you put that in your house?
I have it displayed.
Safe.
It's like
safe, bulletproof.
It's like 5 feet
It's like
tall.
It's like the Mona Lisa in his house. Like there's a
I love those things.
I have
but
a
they're
Bernie
so-
Wrightson section in my house.
Yeah, I love those things. I was just like, where do I put this?
Yeah.
Did you guys have any like interesting like trivia or other notable things you guys wanted to mention? There was like a 2 I've got. He dropped the E in his name when he started doing the official work and professional artwork, just to distinguish himself from an Olympic diver of the same name, Bernie Wrightson. There's a story.
That would be confusing.
There was a story that Lynn Wein had shared about getting Bernie Wrightson on for Swamp Thing. He was saying they were hanging out, and Bernie had just gone through like a really bad breakup, and Lynn was like, "Yo, I actually just started writing this story, and I think it's really similar to how you're feeling right now, man. If you want to take a look." And I guess he pitched him the idea, and Bernie was like, "I'm all for it. Sign me up. I'm doing the artwork for Swamp Thing." That was pretty cool. When he passed away, The Walking Dead dedicated a whole episode. It was the season 7 finale of The Walking Dead to Bernie Wrightson. I think I had mentioned Del Toro took a 24-hour pledge of silence in honor of Bernie when he passed away. He also did artwork for bands like Meatloaf and the Captain Stern segment of the animated Heavy Metal.
Yep.
And I think that is... co-created Abigail Kane, major supporting character in Swamp Thing Mythos, introduced in Swamp Thing number 3. But as far as interesting trivia, that's kind of all I wanted to share.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No,
I did see like a video of him, maybe of 2017, of him drawing, and it was I don't know how I missed this, but they were doing like a Kickstarter for like doing some nice reprints, like high quality reprints of the Cycle of the Werewolf stuff. And there was an interview with him drawing, and I just kind of piecing all these interviews I've watched this last week. But he had his drawing hand like very close to the edge of the pencil, like right almost by the point. And he was sketching like that with like, just really close to the point. And then he had his other two fingers kind of bracing
That's crazy.
his right hand. So, I mean...
Did he have a explanation? Or like
No, he was just talking like, oh yeah, it was just like the guy that was kind of doing the Kickstarter, and then he was just sketching something. They were just, it was kind of like B-roll who were there shooting the shit.
Sure.
Yeah. But he did some close-ups of him,
cool.
Drawing, and it was just like crazy if he's that, and he didn't admit or say that he was like in pain or anything, but you figure drawing for that long, you got to have some like arthritic issues.
Sure.
So, I mean, just the fact that he's still willing and wanting to work, despite that, that's just, that's because that can't be an easy way to, draw something.
I mean,
So I wanted to turn the conversation inward. So we've went ahead and highlighted some of his kind of big career highlights and some of the big milestones I think a lot of people might not have been aware of, or a good starting point, So I want to turn it inward and ask, what is it about his art specifically that's like impacted you guys or really won you over as fans throughout the years? I mean, I'm sitting across from two really stellar artists who deal in art, pencil work and such. I mean, did you guys ever borrow anything? Did you examine his artwork for any?
I'd like to go back to talking about how awesome we are.
I think I'm the spiritual successor.
That's great. That's great, Ed. I would like
the
to say,
uncrowned heir.
Oh,
I'll chime in. Marvel.
No, the best thing I like about his work, and just because you see it very rarely, is just how much detail he puts into it, and like all the blacks and stuff he uses, how much value he uses, rather than just because right now it works in some cases, but a lot of times now comic book coloring is more the art than the pencils, So his work is just. It's so much, harsh blacks, like especially when you see Swamp Thing, there's so many like patches of black, and it works. When I try to draw it, it's like garbage. But when he does it, it's he has like a level of detail and a lot of his hatching work, but his work never feels like stiff.
No, not
it's
at
a
all.
lot of movement, even because a lot of times when you have that much detail, you lose some of that the movement in the artwork. Like if you. And he's awesome, like a Jeff Darrow. Like his stuff is super detailed, but it looks like still images of a film.
Sure.
Just the way the angles and stuff he uses.
Mobius.
And Mobius, they're beautiful, but they're very still pictures.
Mm-hmm.
You don't feel the movement like you do with Bernie Wrightson's work.
His artwork it's not frenetic, it's kinetic.
Yeah.
Like every line moves your eye, whether you want it to move or not.
Yeah.
Like that's the one thing I like about Bernie, is that when you look at his artwork, I mean, it commands your eye. Mm-hmm. Like your eyes are arrested upon it. They have no choice. You are going to move where he wants. They're going to move where he wants your eyes to move. And that's another thing, is that Ed made a great point about how his inks and his values didn't rely upon, there's just going to be a badass colorist that will pick up my slack. Like, no, we only have 3 colors and a fart to try and make these pages get off the ground.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
It's up to you to grayscale and use black and white to appropriately fill in all kinds of space, positive and negative. So, he was a master.
So I want to. I saw something that Mike Mignola had said about him that I was like, oh, that's exactly how I kind of feel about him. He said everything Bernie did has soul, and that's how I felt reading that creepy comic adaptation. Was like every monster, no matter like how grotesque it was, just there was some like backstory or something to them that just drew me in. Maybe even a little better than the movie itself. And there was like maybe two of the short stories that I liked better because of Bernie Wrightson's art compared to viewing it in a film-wise. And C had shown me, me and C were going through some of the books that he brought over. And I think it was primarily just the Frankenstein one. But looking at Bernie Wrightson's art, I get the same sense of like wonder and awe as if I'm just looking at comic book art for the first time. It's like, holy shit, how do you... every single line is important. And it's like you can make out every single line. It's like, yo, what this is... How much time did he spend on this one, not even panel, I'm saying like this one little arm portion, you know?
Yeah. Dude, that was him, man. Like, it's ridiculous when you think about it. Like how, I mean, Ed, like if you're doing like line work or even any kind of like cross hatching, like it's so easy to get into that mode where you're like, okay, and you just go and then move on, you straight Jim Lee it, and then, but Bernie was that guy that was like, okay, he like tactically thought about it and then just went, that's one line. Practice, that's another line.
Yeah.
That's another line. That's another line. And now it's like, cool, half an eyelash is done. And there's like a whole person still left to draw. And
like this texture stuff he does with like the swamp, like the castles and the buildings and the trees.
It's like, man, this moss, this mold, you can smush it in your hand. Like you could just feel it. Like it's so well rendered.
And Ed, you did a really good job talking about like his mastery of value and inking. I could definitely see how his contemporaries like Mignola or even a Jay Lee, folks Lee. That
Bruce
even
Timm.
like
Bruce
Tim, even like Sam Keith when he does stuff.
Oh fuck, Sam Keith for sure. Absolutely.
Like, you can see all of these artists and be like, oh, they're really good at inking, they're really good at value master. But then it's like you look at Bernie Wrightson's work and you're like, oh, okay, this is dad standard. Right here. This is dad right here.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's infiltrated each one of their art.
Dude, the bastard children of Bernie Wrightson, like artistically, are like enormous. Like just like battalions of people that he's influenced. It's ridiculous.
And Kelly Jones.
For sure. Yeah. Kelly Jones is that dude who uses the negative space between like in between your knuckles and like sinews and stuff. Like that's so Wrightson.
And I think what makes him stand out for me amongst his contemporaries, or even just modern artists now, is I think this mentality he had about becoming a true artist. Pushing himself to, all right, I've already done comic books. Let me move on to like literature. Now let me move on to Hollywood. And it's like, man, he just was so well rounded, and the amount of respect that he commanded from Del Toro, Mike Mignola, even Walter Simonson, Stephen King. It's like, damn, man, like it's something about his energy and like the way he composes himself. I'll show and see this YouTube video. It's and I recommend anyone listening to probably give it a shot. It's like 6 minutes. It's Harlan Ellison presents Bernie Wrightson.
Dude, Harlan Ellison, just an endorsement from Harlan Ellison would be enough.
Yeah, he says in the video that when he draws, he's already got this very vivid, detailed picture in his mind, and he treats this image in his mind as if it's a projector, and he's projecting what's on his mind on the paper, and all he's doing is tracing. And it's like, damn, so off the bat, you're envisioning this super insanely detailed body of work, and somehow your hands are able to correlate and give you exactly, if that's even 90% of what you see. It's like, damn, man, I've going through everything I've researched and just going through it, I've definitely been like, man, I've been missing out. And I need to like go back and do the research.
It's there though. That's the best part about it, man. It's not going anywhere. No. Take it at your own pace. It's there, man.
His artwork, I put it kind of in the same camp as like John Buscema when he was doing like the Conan magazines, where it's like I don't. Well,
insect.
I say like this
insect,
where it's like I'd rather read it black and white. because I was going through some of the Swamp Thing
sure.
things, and I was like, this is cool, but I don't like this color.
No, I get it, man.
Like it steals it for me.
Yeah, like, and that's only there because, dude, I'm going to sound like Sam Jackson in Unbreakable, where he's like, comics, this at their best are at their, when it's pencils, and even, the inks are good, but when they start getting colorized, it's like they're put through the mass media market and titillated, and they go through all that stuff, and it's that whole monologue in Unbreakable that fucking makes me like
that's
just
why
smile.
When I think Marvel and DC, when I think DC's was called the Essentials, when they did those big like newsprint, black and white.
Yep.
That's the best way, especially to enjoy. Not every artist translates well in that.
No.
But his stuff, because I have this Roots of Swamp Thing, and I like this color version because they don't use that really glossy paper. So the colors, those old school colors, look really garish.
Nice.
Like on my Shang-Chi omnibus, they use that like glossy paper, so those colors don't soak into the paper.
Yeah,
they're just so bright and
yeah.
Like Fu Manchu's yellow, like bright yellow.
Dude, yeah, I wish I wish they'd have done that with the Luke Cage shit. Like I know, the Marvel Masterworks are great, and I have my Hero for Hire, but it's not the same. Like you said, like the colors are garish, but there's a charm to them.
Yeah,
and
I think, but you have to print it on that old school like newspaper.
100% agree.
Yeah.
Is there a particular image or comic or body of work that really stands out for you guys? And I'll lead it by saying, I've been reading. I've read Creepshow, that comic adaptation this week, right after the movie, and C had to slap my hand for it because I was reading the comic book before watching the movie.
What the fuck you doing?
I know. So I'm like 2 stories in, and I started getting like really hooked. And C's like, "No, motherfucker, like watch the movie first." And I was like, "Yo, are you sure? Like I could wrap up the comic book right now."
Yeah, the comic book was a promotional tool.
Yeah. There's a scene in there. It was the crate story.
Nice.
Where oh boy led his wife. Led his wife.
Just tell him to call you Billy.
Real quick, listeners, we're doing this live show, Creepshow, April 13th. We've got some copies of the comic book and DVD up at Coliseum of Comics. If you've never watched the movie or read the comic book, go up to the shop, tell John and Amber about the live show. They'll give you some of the copies we put up there. But it is so worth it. That movie was so fun to me. The comic book, it was kind of like it was like just bonus, But if it wasn't for Bernie Wrightson, it probably would have been a different story. There's a scene in there, right, where the professor has his wife down there, and the fucking monster bites her like face, and there's like this 2-page scene. It's the first one where he jumps out the crate, grabs the woman by the face, and there's another one where he's just gnawing on her face. I swear, I just stared at that panel for like 10 minutes, like examining every.
There's a lot of boobs in that picture.
There's not. I will not let you besmirch my name.
There are a lot of boobs in that picture.
I almost got like a PG.
They're covered.
Like
There's still boobs though, and it's Adrian Barbeau.
Oh, Adrian Barbeau.
Bernie Wrightson's.
But he kills
Adrian
on that,
Barbeau.
and and Ed, I think you brought it up. One of his most infamous, I think, scenes that a lot of people say is that 2-page laboratory spread of Frankenstein. And I pulled it up on on my laptop, and man, it's like. You could get lost in it.
Dude, why do you think I'm trying to get you into Junji Ito so hard? Because he's like the Japanese Bernie Wrightson. Like, he's probably one of the bastard sons of Bernie. No joke. No joke. I bet you anything, if you freaking bring up Bernie Wrightson, he'll be like, shit, nigga, I know who that is.
Whoa.
Damn, he got
that was my impersonation of what? That's not a Japanese person. I thought that was a Japanese person.
That's funny. Ed, what about you? Got a particular body work or image?
That image is pretty strong, but there's another short story. Do you remember that Masters of Horror series they did?
Jennifer, I have it in the box right here, dude.
So Jennifer, was that in Creepy, or was that in?
It was in Creepy.
Creepy. So I saw that because it was I liked Argento did that episode.
He sure as shit did.
So
Steven Weber.
Yep, and the guy from Wings. Remember that show, kids? Nobody? Okay. But there was and I think I have a big creepy collection that has it in there. And I didn't know that was a Bernie Wrightson story because I saw this. Masters of Horrors was this kind of anthology series. Mm-hmm. Was it?
So it was Mick Garris.
Yeah.
Basically always went out to eat with all these horror directors.
Yeah.
And he just decided, like, we all meet up together. Why don't we just do like little horror shorts,
1 hour episodes, yeah.
And we just try and find a network that'll let us do what we want to do. And Argento was, he picked the Jennifer story, which was a Bernie Wrightson tale.
Yeah, so I got my creepy kind of like, it's almost like a best of hardcover type of thing. So it's in there, and it might be that book actually.
I bet it is. That's all his work.
You know
for
what,
creepy.
with Bernie
Okay.
Wright, just kind of flipping through just the pages I did. With Bernie Wrightson, it feels like you're getting the complete package. It's
Yeah.
like, oh, you need a black and white. Art, I got you. Oh, you want me to draw like a car?
And
I got you. Scenery, I got you.
And his creepy stuff is really good because you get those grayscale, those values,
Dude,
on
that's
top of the harsh
yeah,
black and whites.
yes, yeah.
So that story, just because I kind of accidentally found it, by watching this weird episode. That was a weird one. This the
It is
Argento.
weird. It's like
Jennifer.
a modern succubus.
Yeah,
really
so
creepy.
It's a strange. All those episodes, those are all kind of strange.
They felt like foreign films.
Yeah, exactly.
Really odd.
Exactly. And
like
but-
in a weird way, not like in a cool sort of like Terrence Malick kind of way. Like they felt like you're watching Lucio Fulci's
yeah, like Italian weird,
like weird Italian horror
yeah.
shit.
I know, but it's that the Frankenstein work, that it's hard to pick one, and then but the stuff that I remember the most is probably like the Creepshow work.
Cool.
'Cause-
What about you, C?
Yeah, well, the Creepshow was kind of my first sort of like popped cherry of Bernie. So that yeah, really
We're talking about bastard sons.
of all the shit I've said, that's the one thing. But the idea that and Punisher POV, just because it slapped me in the face with how ridiculous it was and how it's like everything like a little boy would be into one comic, like a guy with a gun shooting. I mean, it's literally like made for kids who are going through puberty. Actually, like you don't want to give it to a child who is like 12. Like they'll just be like, and like just freaking explode. Everything explodes.
So I was thinking about recommendations for someone who's listening right now, and they're like, "Damn, okay, I'm sold. Where do I start? What do you guys recommend?" I mean, obviously, it sounds like creepy. If you can get your hands on a cop,
I was going to say the same things I just mentioned. The Creepshow and Punisher POV are great entry points.
Okay. And I'll probably piggyback off that if you maybe need a base for like similarity. I'd probably start out with the Batman, the Cult, or any of the work he did on the graphic novels, and then maybe go into the creepy, the Frankensteins, and some of the other work.
Yeah, I would say get like I said, I'm pretty sure it's still around, but it's called The Roots of Swamp Thing, and then it's printed on the it's in color, but it's printed on like a newsprint type paper, so the colors are more saturated. It's a lot easier to look at.
I remember when I first saw Spider-Man Hooky graphic
that was
novel. I think
crazy.
it was when Marvel had re-released it at some point a couple years ago. But I mean, just the cover, it's like, damn, you got Spider-Man fighting these absolutely terrifying monsters
Fighting like the Thing.
Yo, exactly.
These Lovecraftian.
So I mean, you've got
creatures.
I had a character I loved and familiar with, Spider-Man, and then I was introduced to Bernie Wrightson's art via that, and then I went into the other graphic novel he did with Hulk and the Thing, which is fantastic. Like his spins on
It was the 70s, man.
characters. It's
Fucking
like,
horror was a big deal.
Yep.
yeah. So
And
I
it's weird.
recommend
It's like I
those.
think anything Wrightson's on, they kind of made him draw monsters. They kind of made the story. It's like Spider-Man. We're gonna fight some weird tentacle mouth
dude,
monsters.
Yeah. Ugh.
Sorry. So it sounds like you can't go wrong with Swamp Thing, the creepy, or any of the Marvel or DC graphic novels he did. Any last minute comments, man? I think we're coming up to a good stopping point. Any last minute comments for our man Bernie Wrightson?
No, he's a American treasure. He's greatly missed, but never forgotten.
Yes.
I think Master is a great.
Oh, yeah.
Like just damn, man. That I can't. Like he's in a much like when we did like the Jack Kirby episode or the Mignola ones. It's like he's in a class of his own.
Yeah.
It's like no one is touching this stuff.
And I
man.
think the fact that he did branch outside of the comic book bubble, he kind of made his own path that makes him. I think that raises his status, even though the body of work, quantity wise, isn't there, but the quality is so good, and what he did, it's just and the fact that him and a handful of other artists, did stuff in behind the scene in movies which comics have always wanted to get into before this whole, Renaissance, this whole superhero movie explosion. He did that before, like him and Neil Adams, they did that before.
You don't say who?
Yeah, he'll tell you.
Neil Adams?
He told me that. Yeah,
I don't know if I knew who this guy is.
That's how he introduces himself.
I think
I'm Neil Adams. I created the universe.
I think I definitely piggyback like just to champion like his mindset of like,
hustler.
Diversifying,
diversify your bonds.
Yeah. How many comic book artists do you know that have had an unfortunate career where they just just faded away?
Both Ed and I.
Yeah, it never started.
Man, you guys are
it never
amazing.
started.
Come on, man.
I wish it would fade away.
Wow, man.
Been somewhere.
That wound is.
But I mean,
thanks, Botter.
But for him to have the foresight to
existed.
I'm going to work with Stephen King. I'm going to work on these Hollywood films. It's like, damn, that was.
Well, it was the 70s. If you had a little baggie of Coke, I'm sure Steve would have been like,
This is exactly what I needed. Thanks for the bump, Bernie.
That's a great way to go and end our Bernie Wrightson artist.
this is terrible.
That's a classy show.
That was classy. So, I'll say this, folks. We'll go ahead and wrap up our artist spotlight. This one was on Bernie Wrightson. So if it was your first time tuning in, man, hopefully you guys will check out some of the recommendations that we had. I'm telling you, it's definitely a wormhole that you want to a rabbit hole you want to jump in. Feet first. But if you are listening and you're a big fan of Bernie Wrightson off the bat, and this was only kind of ancillary or supported what you've already feel about Bernie Wrightson, man, let us know. I want to hear some of our fans' favorite Bernie Wrightson moments or bodies of work or stories. That'd be great. You can do so by sending us an email at theshortboxjacks@gmail.com or leaving us a text or voicemail at 904-580-4095. Let us know what you thought about this episode and Bernie Wrightson in general. With that being said, folks, we are going to go and wrap up today's episode. Like I said earlier on, we do have a live episode happening April 13th. This is Saturday at Justice Pub. It'll be taking place 7 to 9. We got a Facebook event page you can RSVP. And like I said earlier, speaking about Bernie Wrightson, actually, he did the art for the comic book adaptation of Creepshow, the George R. Romero and Stephen King movie. So I dropped off a few copies at Coliseum of Comics Jacks. If you go up there and mention John or Amber, hey, I'm going to the live show, you can grab yourself a copy of the Blu-ray or
treat yourself. Absolutely. You will not be disappointed.
For sure.
It is
such a fun movie.
It is exactly the best way to put it. It is fun. The art is incredible. You can say legitimately that this is. I mean, the art is legitimate. It's not just, it's just horror shit or comic books. And I think they addressed that in the movie. It's like, you still reading this horror crap?
Yeah.
It's a big thing in the horror. Everybody that likes horror knows that it's never legitimized as a genre that people think is credible in any sort of way. And the fact that the movie comments on it and that the art is so good, it's like everyone that's attached to this project, whether movie or comic adaptation, is a legitimate artist.
I think you took the words exactly how I felt finishing the movie and the comic book. And I'll definitely mention this at the live show, but watching the movie and reading the comic book and seeing their kind of, jab at that, it made me appreciate not just horror comics, but just horror, the fandom a lot more. That's why I was listening to Straight Chillin' so much. I was like, man, this fandom here is I feel like, that's the shit right there. That's the cool. Oh, word. Alex Ross. Yeah. But yeah, folks, hopefully we'll catch you guys April 13th for our Creepshow themed live event for our good friends at Straight Chillin' podcast crew. And while we're on that topic, man, check them out too, man. They do a fantastic job every week.
I mean, they all right.
I think they just did a review on us, so check that out.
They are always putting stuff out, and they have a phone line too. So
I follow them on Instagram. It's always every day is a new movie I've never heard of. What is this? Where did you unearth this?
Robbie is so good
that Blu-ray collection.
What is this?
That
new
shit
stuff.
Bonkers. So, anyways, folks, real quick, any last minute shout outs, plugs, any things you guys want to chime in on?
No, I can't think of anything.
All right, no worries. All right, folks, we'll catch you guys at the April 13th live show, and also those tickets for Avengers Endgame at Sunray, Thursday, 7 p.m., whatever that Thursday is. I think it's the 25th. Let me double check. Don't give you guys the wrong one. Yep, it is Thursday, April 25th. Like I said, we're doing another movie and podcast event, so buy your tickets from Sunray or wherever it may be when they go on sale, and we'll catch you there, all right? With that being said, folks, thank you so much for listening. Check out Bernie Wrightson, all right?
Yo, what happened to peace? Peace.